Sherlock Holmes, The Final Problem. A dramatic and extended retelling. Shadows over Baker Street. It is with a heavy heart that I take up my pen to write these final lines concerning the singular man who stood taller than all others in the realm of criminal detection, Dr. John H. Watson. London, 1891, 221B Baker Street. It was a cold, gray evening in early April, the kind of evening where London wears its fog like a funeral shroud. The gaslights flickered in the streets, casting long shadows that danced upon the cobblestones. I had just returned from my rounds at the Kensington Infirmary when a sudden impulse overtook me to visit my old friend, Sherlock Holmes. There was something gnawing at the back of my mind all day, a subtle unease, something unspoken, unnamed. As I walked up the familiar 17 steps to 221B Baker Street, that feeling only intensified. I knocked lightly and let myself in. The room was dimly lit as usual. Holmes sat in his high-backed leather chair by the fireplace, his tall, angular frame wrapped in his dressing gown, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin. On the table in front of him was an uncharacteristically cluttered arrangement of documents, photographs, chemical samples, maps of Europe, particularly Switzerland, and a sheet of parchment bearing a strange mathematical diagram. He did not look up immediately. Instead, he spoke in a low voice that barely concealed exhaustion and something even rarer, dread. "Ah, Watson, I wondered if you would come this evening." I was taken aback. "You expected me?" With near certainty, he murmured, finally raising his eyes to mine. They were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. "You always come when I'm at my worst." I sat down slowly across from him. "You look terrible, Holmes." He gave a wry smile, the kind that barely touched his lips. Terrible times call for terrible appearances. There was a moment of silence as the fire crackled softly. Then he leaned forward, his voice suddenly urgent and deadly serious. "Watson, I am being hunted." I blinked, confused. "By whom?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. He stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain back just an inch. Outside, the fog swirled in the gaslight, but to Holmes, it might as well have been the mouth of Hades itself. Professor James Moriarty. Even the name sent a chill through the room. I had heard it whispered before, but never with such clarity, never with such fear. "Watson," Holmes continued, pacing now, "you are a man of logic and medicine, and you trust empirical evidence. I ask you to trust me now on the strength of our friendship. I am engaged in a battle with the most dangerous mind in all of Europe, nay, perhaps in the world." I swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Holmes, what exactly has he done?" He stopped pacing and faced me, eyes ablaze. "He is the Napoleon of crime, the spider at the center of a vast web. Every major criminal enterprise in London, and several abroad, answers to him, directly or indirectly. Robberies, fraud, political assassinations, corruption in the highest levels of Parliament. I've traced them all, and all roads lead to Professor Moriarty." "It is a curious thing, Watson," Holmes said, gazing into the flames. "When you draw too close to the web, the spider feels it. And this spider is the most intelligent predator I've ever encountered." Holmes turned from the fire and moved toward a cluttered desk near the window. He opened a drawer and withdrew a leather-bound file, worn, its edges curled from overuse. "This is a dossier I have built over the past 2 years," he said, placing it before me with a thump. "Contained within are fragments of the professor's empire, barely glimpses. Smugglers, forgers, contract killers, politicians compromised, clergy bribed, and every time I pull at one thread, another appears, stronger and more elusive." I flipped through the pages, stunned by the web of names, symbols, and coded messages. Diagrams of criminal networks were mapped like constellations. In the center of every circle was a name, Moriarty. "Holmes, this is staggering," I said. "But how do you know it's him?"
"All this, it's circumstantial." Holmes smiled faintly, the firelight catching the sharpness of his cheekbones.
"Ah, but therein lies the genius. That is how he operates. He remains unseen, untouched. No trace ever points directly to him. No handwriting, no financial trail. He is a ghost, except to me." He sat down again and lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like thought given form. "3 days ago, I confronted one of his subordinates, Colonel Sebastian Moran, in a warehouse near the docks. I forced a confession from him, under duress. He looked at me meaningfully. Watson, what he said chilled me to the marrow. Moriarty knows everything. He knows where I sleep, when I walk alone. He even knows that I often dine with you at the Diogenes Club every Thursday." I stiffened. "He knows about me? He knows about everyone I care about. That is why I asked you here tonight, because I may not have another chance." I felt a strange hollowness in my stomach. "What are you planning, Holmes?" Holmes leaned forward and tapped the ash from his pipe. "I plan to end it, once and for all. To destroy his network and cut off the head of the serpent. But I cannot do it alone. I need someone I trust implicitly. Someone who can follow instructions without question. Someone who will not hesitate to accompany me to the edge of hell itself." His eyes bore into mine. "Will you come with me, Watson? A pact in the shadows." There was silence for a long moment, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock and the distant sound of carriage wheels outside. The question hung in the air like smoke. "Of course I will," I said. "You should never have had to ask." Holmes gave a rare smile. Not a smirk, not a sign of superiority, but something warmer, grateful. "We leave in 2 days. Pack lightly. Bring your revolver. Say nothing to your wife or friends. Burn any letters you write. From now until this is over, we vanish." I nodded, the gravity of the situation slowly settling upon me. "Where are we going?" "Switzerland," he said. "To Meiringen, to the Reichenbach Falls." That night, I stayed at Baker Street that evening. Holmes insisted. He said the streets were no longer safe, even for me. The windows were latched and covered. The door was locked 3 times over. We spoke little as the night deepened, each of us lost in thought. Sometime around midnight, I awoke to a creaking sound. I rose from the sofa, heart pounding. Holmes was at the window again, silent, motionless. "Holmes, he's watching," he whispered. "Somewhere out there in the fog. He's waiting for me to slip." I walked to him slowly, putting a hand on his shoulder. It was tense, rigid with strain. "He will make his move soon," Holmes said, "and when he does, it will be with precision. I've placed guards on Lestrade and Mycroft, but they are pawns to him. He wants the king." I didn't sleep after that. Morning after. By morning, Holmes had vanished. A note on the table read, "Do not look for me, Watson. I must finish preparations. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Keep yourself hidden, and remember, trust no one." I stood there, the paper trembling in my hand, while outside the London fog rolled ever thicker, swallowing the light. Every station, every alley, every passing carriage, we were being watched. The hand of Moriarty stretched farther than I had imagined, and we were no longer hunters. We were prey. Dr. John H. Watson, Victoria Station, London. Dawn. It was still dark when I arrived at Victoria Station, just as Holmes had instructed. The city was quiet, blanketed in a sullen mist. Porters moved like shadows among the fog, and the occasional whistle of a train pierced the still air like a scream in the silence. I spotted Holmes almost immediately, not by his usual silhouette, but by his gait. He was heavily disguised, a stooped posture, a scruffy beard, spectacles, and the thick overcoat of a middle-aged bibliophile. But I knew that walk. "You're late," he muttered as I approached. "You said dawn," I whispered. "It's barely morning." Dawn arrived 10 minutes ago. Come, the express leaves in 7. He handed me a forged passport and a briefcase already packed. My name was now Dr. William Trevor. Holmes was Sigismund Feltz, a chemistry professor from Oxford. We'll take the train to Dover, he whispered as we boarded. Then the steamer to Calais. From there, we'll cross France under aliases. Avoid main stations. Keep your pistol close. Do not speak to strangers. And Watson, he paused, his voice grave, trust your instincts. The train ride to Dover. The compartment was cold, and the air was filled with the scent of coal smoke and damp fabric. Holmes sat by the window, occasionally peering out. I noticed his eyes scan every platform, every signalman, every child chasing a newspaper. His paranoia was not paranoia. It was calculation. At Canterbury, a man in a bowler hat stepped onto the train. Holmes tensed instantly. The man didn't look our way, but Holmes leaned forward. He was at Paddington last week, watching Lestrade. He's Moriarty's man. We disembarked one stop early, leaving the man behind. Holmes grabbed our bags, and we vanished into a thicket behind the station before catching a coal freight to Dover. No comfort, no delay, no safety. The Channel and the chase. By the time we reached Calais, the sun was rising over the Channel, a bloody smear on the horizon. Holmes was more relaxed, but only slightly. We ate nothing, slept only in shifts. That night in a cramped boarding room in Amiens, Holmes finally gave me the full story. Moriarty's web, the truth revealed. Watson, he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor. You remember that case last year, the suicide of Sir Edwin Marsh? I nodded. It wasn't suicide. You proved that. I proved the means. I never found the man who ordered it. That man was Moriarty. He opened a hidden compartment in his valise and removed a thick envelope. Inside were letters, diagrams, and coded messages. He has agents inside Scotland Yard. Clerks in Parliament. He launders money through 5 different countries. He's been preparing for war. War? I asked, shocked. A war of influence. A quiet war. One fought with blackmail and sabotage. I intercepted a communique to Berlin. He's been selling state secrets. We are no longer talking about London's underworld. We are talking about the future of Europe. I stared at him, the weight of it sinking into my bones. So, he wants you dead? Yes. Because I'm the only one who understands the scale of it, and the only one mad enough to stop him. Lion, then Basil, narrow escapes. Our journey became a blur of narrow escapes and suspicious glances. In Lion, we changed clothes in a tavern bathroom, and left through the back window after spotting 2 men following us. In Basil, a suitcase bomb was left in our train compartment. Holmes had noticed the wire poking out from its lock just before we boarded. Each city brought a new agent, a new shadow, a new code to crack. Holmes grew thinner, more worn, but never slower, never weaker. It was as if the chase fed him. This is a chessboard, Watson, he said in Zurich, and we are nearing the endgame. The ascent to Meiringen. It was snowing lightly when we finally arrived at Meiringen, Switzerland. The air was clear and cold, and the mountains loomed around us like ancient gods. Holmes paused as we stepped off the carriage. Looking up toward the distant peaks. That's where it ends, he said, pointing toward a roaring sound in the distance, the Reichenbach Falls. We took rooms at the Englischer Hof. The innkeeper, a Mr. Peter Steiler, seemed friendly enough, but Holmes was wary. Don't leave your bag unattended, he said, and sleep with your revolver under your pillow. That night, Holmes did not sleep. Neither did I. The final warning, the next morning, a note arrived at the inn. Urgent. Come at once. Your patient in terrible danger. Signed, Miss Watson. It was addressed to me. Holmes examined it for a full 10 minutes before speaking. The ink is dry, but the penmanship is familiar. The signature is forged. This is Moriarty's trap. He looked at me with sadness in his eyes, but we must play our part. A Reichenbach gambit. We had come to the end of the game.
And in that final move, we both knew only one could remain on the board. Sherlock Holmes. The morning in Meiringen broke with an eerie silence. The distant rush of the Reichenbach Falls echoed faintly in the mountain air. It was a sound of nature, yes, but to us it was a countdown, an approaching doom. Holmes stood by the window of our small plain room at the inn, arms folded behind his back, eyes focused on the horizon. "Moriarty is near," he murmured. "He's not a man to rely solely on his agents. He will be here himself. He wants to see the end." I handed him the letter again, the one that had summoned me to the supposed side of a dying patient. "What do we do?" I asked. Holmes turned slowly and gave a smile, a tired, knowing smile. "We spring the trap, but on our terms." Holmes explained his strategy quickly and with precision. We were to stage my departure. As though I believed the letter's urgency, Holmes would remain behind unattended, giving Moriarty a perceived opportunity. "He will strike soon after you've left, likely within the hour," he said. "But I won't be here. I'll be watching." I objected. I told Holmes I didn't leave him, that this was suicide. "Watson," he said gently, "your loyalty has saved my life many times, but this is something I must finish alone." He shook my hand firmly, then pulled me into a sudden, brotherly embrace. It was unlike Holmes. It was final. "Tell Lestrade everything when you return. Give him the papers in my valise. They'll dismantle Moriarty's empire." I left the inn as planned, riding with the guide who had delivered the letter. As we passed into the forest trail, I looked back at the inn. Holmes was no longer at the window, but my instincts wouldn't rest. After less than 10 minutes on the trail, I made an excuse. I claimed I'd forgotten my medical bag, and forced the guide to turn around. "Sir," the guide protested, "we'll be late." "Let them wait," I said. "My patient will still be dying when I get there." We turned back. When I returned to the Englischer Hof, Holmes was gone. The innkeeper had seen him leave not long after I had. A note had been left for me, folded neatly on my pillow. "My dear Watson, should you return too soon and find us, know that I have gone to meet Moriarty at the Reichenbach Falls. This is the conclusion he desires, and perhaps the one I must give him. You were the finest friend a man could hope for. I leave all in your capable hands. Sherlock Holmes." My heart dropped. I dashed out of the inn and took the narrow mountain trail toward the sound of roaring water. The Reichenbach Falls were a furious torrent, falling hundreds of feet into the gorge below. The mist sprayed like a ghost across the ledges, and the sound was deafening. I saw them. 2 figures, just a shadow apart, standing near the edge of the cliff. Holmes and Moriarty. Holmes stood still as a statue, his coat flapping in the wind. Across from him stood a man of sharp, mathematical precision, a man with a hawk-like face and cruel eyes. Moriarty. Even from a distance, I could see they were speaking, but the words were lost to the thunder of the water. Then the argument became more animated. Holmes raised a hand, pointed, shook his head, and then they fought. A brutal, primal struggle at the very edge of the abyss. Holmes ducked a blow, drove a fist into Moriarty's ribs. Moriarty caught him by the shoulder and shoved. Holmes nearly lost balance, grabbed a rock. I shouted his name. Too late. Both men tumbled over the edge. Gone. I scrambled to the cliff's edge, clawing at the slippery rock, but there was no sign of them. Only the frothing waters below. I shouted his name again and again. Nothing but the roar of the falls answered. Later, with the help of locals, we searched the gorge. We found Holmes's notebook, soaked but intact, wedged between 2 stones above the torrent. The final entry, "Should this be my end, let the truth be known." I faced Moriarty not with fear, but resolve. Evil must fall, even if it takes good with it. There was no body. There was no trace. I returned to London a broken man. Lestrade read Holmes's documents and began immediate arrests across England. Moriarty's network collapsed like a dying star. Hundreds of lives were saved. And yet, I would have traded it all to have Holmes back. I published a tribute in the Strand magazine, recounting Holmes's life and final days. The world mourned with me. He had become a legend. But in my heart, he was more than a detective. He was my dearest friend. And yet, months later, strange events began to unfold. A coded telegram arrived at Baker Street, unsigned, but bearing Holmes's unique cipher. A Persian slipper was found at our old rooms, one that had gone missing years earlier, and a violin, a soft, haunting violin melody drifting from an alley behind 221B. Could it be? Was Holmes still alive?
The shadow of the dead. There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact, especially one that screams death but whispers survival. Dr. John H. Watson. Life after Sherlock. The weeks following Holmes's supposed death passed like a dream I could not wake from. Baker Street was quiet. Mrs. Hudson still set out 2 teacups in the morning by mistake. And I often found myself reaching for my notebook to record something he said, only to remember that the voice I cherished was now lost to the roar of the Reichenbach. I continued my practice. Patients came and went, unaware of the great absence that haunted me. But every knock at the door made my heart race. Every footstep on the stairs made me hope it was him. Was it denial? Or did my instincts whisper what my reason refused to believe? A letter that shouldn't exist. 3 months after the fall, a letter arrived, unsigned, addressed in perfect handwriting, Holmes's handwriting. The game is not yet finished. Be still, be silent, watch. I froze. It had no postmark, no scent, nothing to track. But the words, oh, they were him. Impossible, I whispered. He's dead. I saw him fall. But the letter was only the beginning. Clues from the past. I revisited our old sitting room at 221B Baker Street. Mrs. Hudson had kept everything untouched. Holmes's experiments still sat on the table. His chemical stains remained on the rug, and then I saw it. His old Persian slipper, the one he used for storing tobacco. It had vanished months before the trip to Switzerland, yet here it was, resting beneath his chair, pristine, dusted, recently placed. I examined it closely. Inside, folded and hidden beneath the lining, was a note. Watson, look to the shadows, not the stars. I will return when the Queen is safe. S.H. The hidden diary. Holmes was meticulous. He once told me, Watson, should I ever vanish, trust not what you see, but what I prepared. I began to search our rooms thoroughly. Behind a false panel in the bookcase, disguised behind the dynamics of an asteroid, I discovered a small leather-bound diary. It was his. In it, Holmes had written about Moriarty in great depth. But more intriguingly, the final pages were dated after our trip to Switzerland. He spoke of a larger conspiracy, one that went beyond even Moriarty. A silent council of men, politicians, foreign agents, financiers, working in the shadows of Europe. Moriarty was the gatekeeper, Holmes wrote. Removing him opens a deeper war. He hadn't died. He had disappeared. For a reason. The French connection. Following the clues in the diary, I traveled to France. Holmes had hinted at a safe house in Montpellier. There, in a dusty cellar, hidden beneath an apothecary, I found traces, mats marked in his handwriting, dossiers on European agents, and a familiar bottle of rosewater cologne he used for disguise. A journal entry was written in French. Le docteur croit ce qu'il a vu, mais c'est pas ce qu'il a fait. La fin n'est pas la fin. The doctor believes what he saw, but he does not know what I have done. The end is not the end. He was alive, but he didn't want to be found. Not yet. A coat in the mist. On my return journey, I stopped again at the Reichenbach Falls, unable to resist the ghost that haunted them. As the mist rose and the sun set, I thought I saw him. A tall figure, long coat, sharp silhouette, standing where they once struggled. I ran forward, but the ledge was empty. Yet on the stone was something unmistakable, a fresh footprint in the mud, size 9, exactly Holmes's. Game begins again. I returned to London a changed man. I kept my silence.
I told no one, not even Lestrade, but I prepared, because I knew this was not the end. Holmes was alive, somewhere, and if he was still fighting, then the shadows were far from defeated. The final problem, I thought, was not so final after all.